Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 10th, and it is story time. I'm Kimberlyn with Life's Work Yoga, and today's story is a combination of a yoga myth, a personal story, and perhaps an invitation or a challenge to see how these stories are really lifelong stories. In fact, that the message of today's story is that our challenges today are the same challenges that our ancestors had 6,000 years ago. So what is the story? It's the story of the fish. Now, in yoga, there's actually two postures that are named the fish pose. Matsyasana, which is essentially a back bend with some activation to float the legs and to engage a lift of the heart. So it's an active back bend. The second fish-based pose is Matsyendrasana, which is Lord of the Fishes, and this is where it's a seated, bound-legged with a twist towards the top leg. So these poses, these names for the poses, some of my research shows that they are related, some of my research shows that they are completely separate. I'm going to link them today, but I'm going to link them to my own fish story, which is about a fish that we adopted when a friend of mine, Holly, was moving cross country. It was a fish that her family had won at the local fair, the Frederick Fair here in Maryland. Brought the fish home, continued to feed the fish and take care of it and love it for over a year. Now, I don't know about your experience with prizes from a county fair, but they usually don't last very long in my experience. So when Holly was looking for a family to adopt this fish, I thought, why not? I can give this fish a good home for the short time he has left on this earth before he dies. I was fully expecting this fish to die relatively quickly. That is not the case. So in fact, I accepted this fish. My kids had no idea, but were thrilled because they loved and wanted fish. I have another family fish story that goes way back, but we'll save that one for another day. So this fish, this goldfish from the Frederick Fair, was probably, I don't know, about that big, about 3 inches maybe, when we got him. Well, we kept this fish, and my kids used their money, they used their savings, and they earned money to buy new toys and a new fish tank and new ventilation equipment, everything that you could imagine that a goldfish would want. Well, all that did was lengthen Maki, M-A-K-I, Maki's life, and in fact, help him grow bigger. So Maki outgrew the big fish tank that the kids had purchased, and that was where I'm like, no more, we can't go bigger fish tanks. This is as big as our house can contain. So my daughter elected to ask another friend if we could put Maki in their fish pond. Now, beautiful little pond that is in the front yard of my neighbor's house. Well, the reason that this story is being shared today is because this morning I got a message from that friend saying, let Keiko, that's my daughter, let Keiko know that Maki is well. Maki has survived the winter. Yes, the pond froze over, but Maki has survived the winter and he is out and about playing again in the pond. So we're talking 5-6-year-old goldfish at this point, has transported and lived in multiple different locations, and now is happy with a new spring as we arrive into the month of March. So how does this then relate to yoga? Well, first and foremost, I think the practice is to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into when you say yes, right? Find the yes is one of my favorite sayings. And that just simply means reframing our worldview so that we can find what we are embracing, what we're welcoming into our life. Now, I didn't intend to welcome Maki into my life for such a long period of time, but in doing so, what great joy he's brought not only to my kids, but an opportunity to get this funny email, and now an opportunity to link it to yoga mythology. So just like today, humans have always loved stories, and stories are a way for us to share information, particularly information that we may not have all of the capacity or the knowledge to really understand the circumstances. And so there's two yoga postures that are related to fish, and that is the fish pose. Now, one of those is Matsyasana, which is essentially a reclined back bend, and the other one is Matsyendrasana, which is the Lord of the Fishes, which is actually quite different. It's a seated, bound twist. I have been told through my research that these stories, these two fish poses, are a shared story of the same fish. And then I've heard from others that they are in fact different fish. To me, it makes no difference. You can do your research and decide for yourself. But Matsya was considered the first incarnation of Vishnu, or Lord Vishnu. And in that sense, Vishnu knew that the world was going to flood, a great flood that was going to encompass the whole world. Now, this is parallel to perhaps the Christian story of Noah and the flood. And God came to Noah and said, build a boat. Well, in this mythology, Vishnu, the god, wants to help the humans, and so he elects to be reincarnated into a fish. Okay? Matsya is the name of that fish. And in his intention, or so the story says, that his hope was to be able to save those who are good, the humanity who is worthy of being saved. So, Matsya is now living in the river as a teeny tiny fish, having been reincarnated from his godlike power. Well, there is a king named Manu, M-A-N-U, who has come to the river to perform his spiritual practices, his daily sadhana, in which case he dips his vessel, it's a kamandal, he dips his vessel into the river to collect water. And in that scoop, he also catches this itty-bitty tiny fish, Matsya. Now, his first inkling, he's a good man. He's not an evil man. He's not a torturous man. This king, his first intention is to return the fish to the river. But Matsya begs him, please don't return me, take me home. I want to live in your space. So Manu does in fact take the fish home. Now, I am no wise king, and yet it's so interesting how we can be compelled to act outside of what our intention was. This was a spiritual practice. The fish was not part of the spiritual practice. And yet, by taking the fish home, by being open to this new opportunity, Manu was able to then recognize that this fish kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and in fact, embodied the spirit of a god, a power beyond earthly power. So, after having outgrown every container that Manu could provide, Manu finally accepted the fact that the fish had grown too big, in which case needed to be returned to the ocean. Now, I want to read this. He said, they realized the fish must be some kind of sacred deity and bowed down in submission, asking the fish for enlightenment. The fish revealed himself as Lord Vishnu, the god of preservation. So just like today we have challenges with global warming and environmental concerns of exhausting resources or pollution and trash, even at the beginnings of the stories of humanity, we've struggled with understanding the balance of preserving that which we need to live, that which is creation, and our human interests or our needs. Vishnu warned Manu that there was this great flood that would come and submerge the world and destroy all living beings. So Vishnu, remember the god in the form of the fish, asked Manu, the king, to save humanity. And in order to do that, he asked Manu to build a great ship and to gather all the worthy sages, birds, animals, and plants. Vishnu then promised to guide the ship and all its occupants to safety. Now, my daughter's fish Maki is still in the pond. He has not revealed himself as a lord of any kind, nor has he predicted the end of the world by way of a flood. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is simply that Manu did indeed build this ship, filled it with all of the important sages, birds, animals, and plants, and then it began to rain. And it rained and it rained and it rained. And it rained like it had never been seen before. So this is the parallel for me, right? The story from the Christian Bible. So many of our traditions, particularly those of a religious bent, share these common stories of how we faced a challenge. We overcame a challenge, but not without the wisdom from a source beyond ourselves, this God-like source, right? So this is not meant to undermine your beliefs, your values, your religion at all. It's just meant to show you that we are already connected. As humans, we share a mythology. We share a desire to understand our experience, to understand our stories. But the understanding of the story is more than just reciting the story. It's about finding the way in which it can teach us how to be better in living our lives, how to be better humans, right? So when the storm subsided, Manu became the ruler of this new world, and he replanted everything that he had harvested to be on the boat in a mindful manner, is the way the story goes. So hopefully there's some intelligence and some wisdom, as well as the intention of being in good faith. But as he planted everything, people began to live their lives, right? Those who had survived continued to have families and continued to do their life's work, but they were forgetting about the story. So the story is the way that we can not only remember that, but also compel each other to live our best lives. Now, this is where the story is sometimes parsed. At this point, as people were beginning to forget and confusing the reality with our desires or our wants, Parvati, who is the wife of Shiva, noticed and asked Shiva to share his wisdom of yoga in order that she might be able to help mankind, humankind. So as Shiva is telling Parvati this wisdom, it occurs to them at this point that one of the surrounding islands is actually a fish, an enormous fish. This fish had taken in all the teachings that Shiva has shared, and in doing so, blesses the fish to enlightenment. Hence, Matsya becomes Matsyendrasana, Lord of the fishes. In fact, Matsyendrasana is now commissioned as the first teacher in the tradition of Hatha Yoga, or the posture-based yoga. In fact, it's said that Matsyendra went on to teach yogis so that they wrote and compiled the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is one of the most ancient and relished texts for yoga tradition. So, Maki, the fish from the Cahill house, to the fish pose, to rescuing our humanity. How is it that you can apply this story to your life? Maybe there was a time when you were guided to safety, and a fish in any form was your guide, was your teacher. Perhaps there are some containers in your life, some roles that you play that you have outgrown, and it's time to shed that layer of who you once were to become who you are, a little like a snake shedding its skin, or a lobster outgrowing its shell, or a fish who grows too big for its container. So what can you learn from the story of the fish? What is it that you want to apply to your story? I would love to hear those. I'd love to hear your reflections. I'd love to invite you into more conversation about the myths, the mythologies, the stories, and the human connection that we facilitate in order to help us grow into being our best selves. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Kimberlyn with Life's Work Yoga, and this has been Story Time. I'll see you next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Or check out all the Storytime videos with a little bit of editing and a little bit of adaptation to make them a little bit tighter at lifesworkyoga.com. All the way over to the right-hand side, you'll see the blog, and under the blog, you'll see my Storytime link and all of the postings. Again, have a great day. Make it an amazing day by choosing to show up in your authenticity. May you breathe deeply, move freely, labor lovingly, and live vibrantly. Namaste.